Can you imagine 30 years from now, a notorious modern box office failure suddenly is considered one of the greatest movies of all time?
That is, quite a story.
You laugh, but that's exactly what happened to Wizard of Oz, which was a big flop commercially when it was released and now is considered one of the greats. So here's hoping for a Lone Ranger reevaluation in 10 years, am I right? Maybe not. Here's a list of some of the biggest movie flops that eventually became modern classics. Let's get into it right now. 1994's The Shawshank Redemption is close to perfection. Its heart, its humor, its tragedy, its hope all built nicely to one of the greatest final scenes in movie history. And statistically, it's considered one of the best films ever. No, seriously, on IMDb's top-rated movies of all time, it's ranked at number 1 above things like The Godfather Part 2, The Dark Knight, Schindler's List, etc. Back in the days when we all had cable and not just streaming services, it was one of those films that you would catch and just turn on to watch it. But did you know at the time of its release, it was a major bomb? It opened up at number 9 at the box office for its opening weekend, and numbers only got worse from there. There's even a fun story of how opening weekend director Frank Darabont and producer went to a theater to see a live audience react to the film, only to find no one there. Ouch. Fight Club is supposed to make you uncomfortable. That's kind of its whole thing. It's supposed to be a violent commentary on society, and you're not supposed to like how it looks. It gets you thinking, but maybe not in the way the general audience would want to. That probably explains its poor box office at the time of its release. And that's kind of crazy to think about, right? Fight Club has one of the most famous twist endings of all time that we're all pretty aware of, I imagine, at this point. But when it first opened in theaters, it grossed about $11 million in its first weekend. But nowadays, it's become such a huge part of our pop culture. Everyone knows the first rule about Fight Club, right? It's something like bring a ton of snacks if it's your first night there. I don't know. I don't really remember. But oh, guys, I got to tell you this crazy thing that happened in my Fight Club the other night.
First rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
Oh, okay. Maybe some other time. When you see lists of the greatest movies of all time, there's usually one that's at or very close to the top. It's Citizen Kane. Orson Welles' magnum opus, the 1941 film, tracks the life of publishing tycoon Charles Foster Kane as a group of reporters scramble to find the meaning behind his final words, Rosebud. While it may not be for the casual viewer, it's still a film that every film lover ought to see and know about. You know, you might be at one of those fancy dinner parties and someone brings up Citizen Kane and you want to sound smart and be part of the conversation, so go watch it if you haven't. And given that it's declared one of the greatest movies ever made, did it enjoy box office success? Nope, not at all. It came and went without much fanfare and was considered a box office failure. But then a funny thing happened. Over 10 years later, the film's distributor sold its library to television, where more people started watching it, and then film critics reevaluated it and started calling it the most influential film in a long time. As more critics and audiences discovered the movie, its popularity grew, and now here we are. If you were a child of the 90s, chances are the film Hocus Pocus has a special meaning to you. It's considered a Halloween classic now, and every year you'll find it playing almost continuously around the month of October. But it just goes to show how much nostalgia can affect the love for a movie. When it was released in 1993, it got terrible reviews and was a huge box office disappointment. But when networks like the Disney Channel started airing it every year, a younger generation fell in love with it. It's almost like the movie put a spell on us? Huh? When you think of the greatest animated films of all time, your mind might go to all the classic Disney and Pixar films, but I think The Iron Giant deserves a spot on that list, don't you? It's an incredible movie that's beautifully animated with a compelling story and a whole lot of heart. It definitely still holds up today. If you saw the movie, chances are you liked it. So why did it completely flop at the box office? Well, this one could probably be chalked up to poor marketing. Reviews and test screenings for the movie were fantastic, which is something that surprised the studio. The marketing campaign for the film was next to non-existent, with Warner Bros. Being hesitant thanks to their previous big misfire, Quest for Camelot. So of course, The Iron Giant tanked completely. You know the saying, ahead of its time? Well, that often applies to movies. Sometimes movies have a message they're trying to get across, but it just doesn't land with audiences. The same goes for Starship Troopers, Paul Verhoeven's science fiction masterpiece that's a biting satire on war and fascism. Problem was, that message wasn't received when the film was released, and the film just managed to break even on its budget. But come on, the movie is great when you watch it today in a sort of scary because it's true type of situation. A lot of audiences and critics took the film's obsessive violence and military propaganda at face value instead of seeing it as an actual satire. Watching it nowadays, the message is clear, and it's no wonder it's become such a beloved movie today. So go watch Starship Troopers again right now, soldier. That's an order.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
The Shining is nowadays considered one of the greatest horror films of all time, and for good reason. You see any of those documentaries that detail just how much work Stanley Kubrick put into totally messing with your mind with the movie that it deserves a special recognition. But at the time of its release, it wasn't appreciated. A lot of critics cited its excessively long runtime and a lack of real scares and wrote the film off. But it's clear that the critics who were just looking for another horror film weren't really understanding what Kubrick was trying to go for in terms of psychological dread. And thankfully, time has been friendly to The Shining, and a lot of people consider it one of the scariest movies ever made. But not Stephen King, of course. Yeah, he still vocally hates it. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, do you? As we learned recently with the Snyder Cut of Justice League, a director's cut really can change everything, right? Well, that's sorta how the sci-fi classic Blade Runner found new life. Originally released in 1982, the film was a critical and commercial failure, which I think can be attributed to a molasses-like slow plot and people's expectations that this would be an action movie when it clearly isn't. You show up to the theater looking for robot fights and instead you get a meditation on what it means to be human, you might be a little let down, right? Anyways, 10 years later, a director's cut was released and it started to gain more popularity. And then a few other versions were released over the years, making everything really confusing, but cementing that yes, Blade Runner deserved more recognition. I blame The Thing's failure on that evil, disgusting-looking, vile E.T. Okay, fine, that's a little harsh, but it's true. E.T. the Extraterrestrial had just come out and was on its way to be one of the most popular family films of all time. So of course, the next alien-like movie that was released was going to have scrutiny on it. It's a shame then that it was John Carpenter's The Thing, which is now considered a landmark horror film and one of John Carpenter's best works. Maybe people didn't like the slow burn aspect of a shape-shifting alien, or maybe they just didn't like its ambiguous ending. Whatever the reason, The Thing received an abundance of awful reviews that when you read them now, almost seem laughable. We all know comedy is subjective. Everyone just has different tastes, so that's why I know I'll get some eye rolls when I say 1985's Clue is one of the funniest movies ever. But it is. Starring an absolutely stellar cast that includes a bunch of big 80s stars like Tim Curry, Christopher Lloyd, Madeline Kahn, and Michael McKean, the movie is packed with just hilarious one-liners and sight gags. But at its time, the movie bombed pretty hard. Critics didn't necessarily love it, and audiences didn't respond to it that well. Maybe it had something to do with the 3 separate endings it had that were different for every theater. But nowadays, when we can just stream the complete movie with all 3 endings at home, it makes the viewing experience so much better. Okay, Jupiter Ascending, Terminator Dark Fate, A Wrinkle in Time, Mars Needs Moms. Oh, sorry, I was just looking at some of the biggest 2010s box office bombs to see what's going to become a big hit 20 years from now. Hey, if you think I'm crazy, just look at all the evidence. Thanks for watching.